If you're already working in Premiere Pro, you already understand how vital the right tools are in optimizing your workflow. At Keycode Media, we're more than just resellers. As a system integrator, we've spent decades curating solutions that truly enhance creative processes. As an Adobe partner with access to over 400 product lines, we've seen firsthand what works best for creative teams of all sizes. So today, we'd like to highlight some top products that integrate seamlessly within the Adobe ecosystem, from hardware to plugins, and later, we'll take a look at some enterprise-level tools used by large M&E teams. We'll start with some of our favorite tools in the edit bay. Now, the Elgato Stream Deck isn't just a compact controller. It's a game changer for editors who need efficiency. We love how customizable it is. It offers programmable hotkeys and icons that automate everything from launching apps to controlling complex sequences. For Premiere Pro users, this means saving time on repetitive tasks and focusing more on creativity. Whether you're handling playback controls or designing cool macros, this device integrates into your workflow like a trusted assistant. AJA I/O 4K Plus. Now, when it comes to SD, HD, and even 4K capture, plus monitoring and output, the AJA I/O 4K Plus stands out as an all-in-one tool. And the best part is that it works incredibly well with Premiere Pro. Tektronix has long been the industry standard for hardware monitoring. Now, Telestream's Tektronix Prism allows for SD, HD, 3, 6, and 12G SDI monitoring, plus 2110 and 2022-6 IP monitoring. When you need mission-critical monitoring from Premiere Pro in your edit suite or even in the control room, Prism is a great solution. If you're like me, you probably get footage where pulling a key is challenging. Background Remover not only helps pull a key on poorly lit footage, but it also uses AI to determine what's in the foreground and what's not. This means you can now separate your elements for more creative options in post, whether you shot chroma key or not. Next up, we have the Iodine Pro Mini SSD. Now, we've been impressed with this drive, particularly for its on-set usability. This SSD can spit out data at a mind-blowing 40 gigabits a second, but can also work via USB 2, 3, and 4, plus Thunderbolt. It's also got AES 256-bit encryption and device passkeys to secure your stuff. However, the digital screen on the drive is the real awesome part of this. It allows users to track and organize data on individual drives. Okay, speaking of drives, let's now transition to collaborative editing tools. We'll start with a few of the top shared storage providers and how they're innovating. First, we'll start with SNS Evo with Share Browser. And when it comes to collaborative media storage, SNS Evo, paired with their Share Browser software, it stands out as one of the most feature-rich shared storage solutions for creative teams. Now, not only does it integrate with Adobe workflows, but it's also fully compatible with all the major creating software providers that I have no doubt you're using. This makes it a great, versatile choice for teams using a variety of tools. We particularly dig SNS's additional tools like Slingshot, which offers powerful automation for transcoding backups as well as project management, plus Nomad, which allows users to edit remotely with the same seamless experience just as if they were on site. Share Browser's intuitive UI is an added bonus which simplifies media management even on complex projects. So from small teams to large enterprise-level operations, SNS Evo provides the reliable infrastructure that's needed for efficient and scalable collaboration. Facilis and their latest Fast Cache WAN Accelerator feature is what really has impressed us here at Keycode Media. Fast Cache leverages Facilis' custom shared file system to write any access data to local storage or system memory on the client workstation while always maintaining an active path to the central storage volumes for collaboration and a seamless workflow. There are a host of applications for this, including providing edit performance when there is slow LAN connectivity, plus improving file playback, but it also offers a completely unique approach to remote editors who are accessing and collaborating off on-prem SAN storage. Next up, we have LucidLink, and when LucidLink was first introduced, we all knew it was a game changer, right? We're impressed by how it allows multiple users to access and edit large media files in real time within Premiere Pro, just as if you were working on local on-prem shared storage, but it's all in the cloud. This is a massive benefit for distributed teams, especially when time-sensitive projects require immediate attention. We've also seen customers turn to LucidLink when they need to quickly scale up with freelancers to meet tight deadlines on large projects. If you're like me, you hate seeing the dreaded media offline screen. Strawberry offers a streamlined media management solution fully integrated with Adobe Creative Cloud. We love how it eliminates redundant files and enhances media organization, and it ensures you'll never deal with a media offline issue again. Whether editors add last-minute media or they move files, Strawberry automatically tracks assets in the background, keeping the entire team on the same page. Next up, we have Automate IT by Embrace. Automate IT brings a level of automation that media teams have long needed. It offers automation, orchestration, and collaboration tools that cut down on manual tasks, and it allows creatives to focus on production rather than logistics. Next up, we have Flix by Highscale. So with its cloud-native approach, Flix ensures you can ingest, transcode, and orchestrate content anywhere, whether it's in the cloud or on-premise or in a hybrid environment. What we appreciate most is its unique cluster UI, which provides a visual, interactive map of your processing jobs and real-time data and control. Next up, Helmet Effects. Helmet Effects delivers enterprise-level broadcast and sports media management similar to Avid Interplay to creatives that are working with Adobe. This advanced project management tool is designed to streamline the organization of Premiere Pro projects. Helmet automates tasks like project templates and render processes while managing search and file operations in the background. We appreciate its ability to keep large teams aligned, ensuring that no one misses a step during even the most complex projects. So that's our rundown of essential tools that you can elevate your Adobe Premiere Pro workflow with, whether you're a solo editor or part of a large creative team. Please contact Keycode Media if you'd like to receive a free first consultation or get instant pricing for any of the products mentioned. Now that we've shared some of the cool tools that we like here at Keycode Media, it's now time to hand you over directly to Adobe. Take it away.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure to be here at Keycode. The first thing that I'm going to show you is the new color management inside of Adobe Premiere. And this is something that starts by the moment we start bringing footage into Premiere. Premiere is now recognizing and automatically detecting more log formats, more raw formats than ever before. And we're applying an automatic transform to the footage to make the color look good right out of the gate. I can still take a clip and load it up in the source monitor if I want to see that original log footage, but directly in the timeline, I'm now seeing really, really nice color right out of the gate. And this is true for just about any type of camera: Sony, Canon, Fuji, Red, you name it, we are supporting these different types of log formats. And this also ties in with something that we've done with our general color setup. In the past, Premiere worked in specific modes where you would edit in a 709 mode or you would edit in an HLG mode. This is something that's found under the sequence settings, under this new color management tab, and we still have those direct modes that we've had in the past. But one of the cool things that we've now added is a new wide color gamut mode. And this is looking like it's going to be the default for people moving forward, because this provides just a larger playground to play with color. It means that more of the dynamic range of those log clips is available inside of Premiere Pro to push and pull and twist the color to your liking. I'm going to leave this in Direct 709 mode for just a moment here. We'll go ahead and click OK, just because I want to show kind of the default. And these modes are in there for backwards compatibility. If you have an older project, you bring it into the new color management, it should look the same. And the way these sliders will work is still going to be the same. So if I have this, this particular clip selected here in the sequence, I come in here and I use this exposure control. You can see it kind of uniformly brings things down, but the skin starts to look a bit kind of washed out the further I bring the exposure down on this clip. Let's go ahead and go to settings, and I'm going to switch this color setup to wide gamut. Now, under the hood, this is actually using something called ACES CCT. It's a small part of an overall ACES color workflow. It's a known commodity for working in this wide color gamut space. So we're not instituting full-blown ACES in Premiere just yet, but this gives us that wide color gamut to work with. And if you look here, just the look of the footage as I move this same slider in this wide color gamut space, you can see how it's preserving the brightness of the woman's arm in the shot, the highlights on the windowsill here as we're moving this around. So we're super, super excited to work with this. There's a number of different effects inside of Premiere that are color space aware and will automatically work with this. And you still have all the flexibility to use the format that you're looking for. If you're looking for doing things with LUTs, if you prefer LUTs for some reason, you can kind of mix and match depending on the formats that you're working with in the timeline. It's designed to make color management super, super simple. You just flip it over to wide gamut, set it and forget it, and you don't have to worry about it. So we're super excited about some updates coming with Firefly for video. So Firefly for still images has been out for a while, but the new hotness is Firefly for video. And we're super, super excited about bringing this to a larger audience with beta. What I'm showing right now is just some examples. These are actual clips that were generated using the new Firefly for video beta. This shows some of the additional controls that are available dealing with setting up camera motion from various buttons. But the whole idea of being able to type into a text prompt and generate clips is something that we're super, super excited about. Whether these are for kind of a pre-visualization, whether you're trying to build out elements that you're going to use in something like Adobe After Effects, or even playing around with motion graphic styles. And it's also possible to use a reference image as part of your prompt. So if you have a particular picture that you want to start from, you can actually do that. We're also super excited about Generative Extend. This will be the first new feature dealing with Gen AI imagery directly inside of Adobe Premiere. And the idea behind this is Generative Extend will allow you to take any clip on the timeline, wherever you've decided your trim point is, you can actually extend up to 2 seconds beyond that in order to just maybe hold on a beat before you cut or dissolve to something different. This also includes audio. So if you're just looking for extending out some room tone, it's a fantastic tool for using that as well. So performance is something that I could just kind of touch on and talk about here. It's difficult to set something up to showcase for this, but basically the team of engineers has been hard at work on trying to make exports faster, make sure that you have great performance. Everything with color that I was showing, those are all native clips that are in 4K, 5K, 6K, 8K in size, editing direct inside of the Premiere Pro sequence. So we've always had really good performance with that. We now have better performance with more formats, and we've improved on our export for ProRes, speeding it up in some cases to up to 3 times faster. So as you're exporting out your files, you're just seeing a big improvement in how quickly we can get your exports done. One new feature that we're actually looking at, we're super excited about, is the new properties panel inside of Premiere. Now, a little bit of background on this. If you go looking for the Essential Graphics panel, you're not going to find it. It's now replaced by the Properties panel. But the Properties panel it's everything that you could do with the Essential Graphics panel as far as controlling and moving properties of your text and graphics. But now this also works on video clips, audio clips, pretty much anything in your timeline can now be adjusted and modified using the Properties panel. So if I have a particular set of, some B-roll footage in the timeline here, and I need to make a modification to this, and this is the other thing that's great about the Properties panel. If I select multiple clips, I can actually come in here, for example, let me just jump to this. Maybe we want to give the end of this more of a widescreen, a little bit of a matted look. You'll notice that I'm doing this across all these different clips. This is happening with one adjustment on multiple clips at the same time. So the Properties panel becomes kind of that one-stop shop. As we've grown Premiere, we've actually added all these different essential panels in different places for adjusting and making modifications to these different values here. And we wanted to just have that one-stop shop where you can just know, go to properties. If you don't find what you're looking for here, up in the upper corner, there's a little 3-dot menu here that reveals advanced effect controls, color controls, browsing your effects and transitions, browsing graphics and templates, and browsing Adobe stock audio. Which, oh, little bonus thing here, we actually shipped over 15,000 sound effects are now included in Adobe stock for free. You can actually go in and you can browse and work with these sound effects directly from the Essential Sound panel. But with properties, this just becomes that one stop, that one location that you can go in, find the controls you're looking for. If you don't see the advanced options, you know where to go. By clicking on the 3 dots, you can quickly find what you're looking for. And that's the whole goal of properties, is just getting people to the right controls at the right time. Well, let me dive into some of the audio workflow stuff that we've been working on. And the first thing I, of course, want to showcase is enhanced speech, because this has just been a game changer for the way that Premiere operates. Now, to do this, I'm just going to select all of these clips here. And I don't see my control in properties, but I know exactly where to get to that. I can go into open more audio controls, and here is the Essential Sound panel. Here's my enhanced speech. I'll go ahead and turn that on for these clips here so that you can see. I've got those now set up. Basically, what enhanced speech is doing is it's listening to the audio down to the sample level, and it's trying to recognize human speech. It goes through and analyzes individual sounds that a human being may make as part of speech, and it rebuilds the waveform of just that speech in a clean environment. So rather than the usual way of taking audio and kind of trying to carve these frequencies out to get rid of the fountain in the background and carve out the echo with different plugins and things like this, this is just taking the idea of let's detect what phonemes are being used in human speech and just rebuild those into a fresh new waveform. The controls for these are actually set up in such a way that if I go through and I select all of these again, there is actually a mix slider in here that lets me kind of blend in some of the original so that it doesn't sound too sterile. That can actually be a problem with this, is that the generated audio can be a little bit too sterile. So I've got an example here. I'm going to go ahead and select all the clips in my timeline here. I'm just going to start playing this back, and I'm going to toggle on the original audio. I'll do that right now. And I'll play a little of this, and then I'll toggle to the enhanced speech version so that you can compare and contrast the difference between these two. All right, go ahead and hit play.
My name is Lauren Y.S. I'm a muralist. I've been a muralist for 10 years. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and I was always drawing and painting, always getting in trouble for doodling in my math workbook, for example. I was always a fan of street art. I'd never seen anyone doing a mural before, but I always loved large-scale work and thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. And when I graduated college, I was just wandering around San Francisco and saw someone painting a mural in a big blue wish, and I was just like, I have to do that. I didn't know.
So what you can see there is just the difference between the two. It's definitely one of those things that it's an amazing tool in your toolbox, particularly if you've got audio recorded in an uncontrolled environment where you just got that, trying to get a microphone that's 10, 15 feet away to sound like a lavalier is kind of been the holy grail for a while. This can do it in certain circumstances. It's a pretty amazing tool. And at any point you're not liking a particular segment and how enhanced speech is working with it, you can play with this slider and actually dial in and go back to some of the original and some of the generated audio. So fantastic tool here. This is just part of what we've done dealing with different audio workflows. If I go back to that main sequence that I was working with here, we've added a number of different controls as far as being able to adjust fade in and fade out controls directly on the timeline here. We have a little control box here that I can just pull out a fade in or a fade out, and I can adjust the exact sine wave, what the cosine value of the curve here, to get the exact type of fade in that I'm looking for. There's so much more I could show you dealing with audio. We've gone through and kind of revamped a lot of the way audio is displayed. We're automatically detecting the type of audio so that you don't have to select clips and say, these are dialogue, these are music. Premiere does it automatically. And we've added new badge controls in here so that if you're looking for the controls for something like auto ducking, something that would affect music, you can literally just click this little button and it takes you right to those controls for you. So a lot of extra work done, just kind of improving, making it easier to discover things dealing with audio directly in the Premiere Pro timeline. There's a little tiny new feature that actually showed up in 24.6. It's in the shipping version of Premiere, and I'm actually super excited about it, even though it's dealing with a technology that's like decades old. We thought linear timecode was kind of a dead technology, but with the rise of all these small cameras and inexpensive tools for actually adding linear timecode to things like, GoPro style cameras and the like, we're starting to see a resurgence in the need for support for LTC, for linear timecode. This is timecode recorded on an audio track. And we've actually added that into Premiere now, where we can actually recognize clips that have linear timecode. So if I come in here to one of these clips, I'll just right click on it and go to modify, go to timecode. You'll see that there is a new option in here. It sounds strange thinking about linear timecode as a new feature, but this is something, as we've seen the rise of people doing multicams with like 20, 30, 40 cameras covering a live event, and especially as you're adding in these cheaper, more inexpensive cameras that don't support a timecode track natively, it's a really, really valuable thing to have. And I'm super excited that the team listened to the editors on our forums and said, you know what, we got to go back and support that again. So here it is. All right, that's about everything that I have. Let's hand it back over to the guys at KeyCode.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Broadcast to Post. I'm Jeff Sengpiel, CTO here at KeyCode Media. We just saw Carl Soule demonstrate the latest features in Adobe Premiere 25, which was released a little earlier this month. If you're watching this later, you'll have a full recording of the Premiere Pro demonstration on the KeyCode Media YouTube channel, so please be sure to subscribe and like while you're there. If you got questions, please toss those in the chat if you're watching live right now. Before we get started, today we're thrilled to bring you a very special edition of this podcast. Joining me today as a co-host is Michael Kamas, Senior Director of Innovation here at KeyCode Media. Welcome to the party.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a little bit of a homecoming, but it's a homecoming, and people have bought their significant others. So it's all these people that I've known for a long time, and then all these new people. But I am just thrilled. KeyCode in the past 6 years since I've been gone has just grown at an explosive rate, and I'm thrilled to bring some tech back home.
Excellent. So together we're going to dive into some updates for Premiere, including color management, redesign properties panels, Firefly video, enhanced speech. Let's get started. Hey, Carl, how are you doing?
Hey, glad to be here, guys. Great to see both of you back. And Michael, great to see you back at KeyCode.
Love working with you, Carl. This is great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So let's jump in on the color management stuff. With the new color management updates, how is that going to impact workflows for those who are handling multiple formats, like HDR and SDR, in the same timeline? Are there going to be specific industries or project types where this is going to make the biggest difference? Walk us through how colorists or other people around the color process might leverage these changes in their collaborative environment.
Well, for one thing, we do see a lot of tools that have to deliver direct out of Premiere Pro, and I think those are the ones that are going to be the most affected by this. They're the ones that have been asking for better color tools, just overall better color. Everybody these days wants to shoot in something like RAW or log. They don't want to bake the color in at the camera level. They want to be able to manipulate it in post. But at the same time, not everybody has the time and the budget to go to a coloring suite and actually do the work with a colorist actually sitting down in front of the console and grading on a collective basis. So where I see a lot of use of this is going to be in like those magazine shows, people that are, again, having to work directly with the camera files, being able to output directly from Premiere, matching color between cameras, just better overall control. You mentioned HDR, and that's one of the side effects of working with a wide color gamut space. Is it does allow us to bring in footage from multiple sources. Whether we're mostly talking about log footage here, but this is also true if you're shooting in an HDR format. It can be confusing, especially for the mid to lower level users out there. Cameras like, this is an R5C that I have here. If you look in the camera, there's like 14 different formats, that you can shoot to, and just trying to understand like which one works. Why is this one blown out and this other one is not? What this does is it allows for us to do some management on our level so that you get a pleasing result in the timeline, regardless of what the format was, and you have the control to go in and actually make modifications.
So it almost sounds like the target role for these folks is not going to be a traditional colorist, anyone doing a grading process, as we come to know it today in theatrical and episodic.
I want to stress the tool set in Premiere is not changing in this release. So if there are people out there, I could make the argument that as far as coloring tools out there, the Lumetri panel is probably the most used tool on the planet for this. But particularly when you're talking about high-end post, there are other color grading applications out there. There are different tools that people like to use. And in a lot of cases, people are managing their footage on ingest. They're actually going through and doing some sort of first light grade to get the footage looking halfway decent in the edit bay. And then the editor is just using, the dailies media, the offline or proxy media, whatever you want to call it. So those folks, I don't think are going to be as affected. Now, it is possible to actually do what I call live color in Premiere. It really just depends on what the director and the editor want to work with. I've been involved with certain films where the director and the editor actually did want to try and make the color as close to final as possible. Obviously, things still went through a grading step at the end. But more and more, that idea of having something that doesn't look close to final in the edit bay is becoming more the norm. And, we've even seen some feature films where the dailies pipeline was entirely done with PQ, where you are actually seeing HDR in the edit bay. So we're trying to make sure we can accommodate for that. And, at the same time, I do think the people that are going to see the majority of the benefit from this, are the folks that are editing with their camera native files. I can't tell you, when they added the HDR switch on the iPhone, how many calls at like 9:30 on a Friday night that I got from folks saying, why does my footage look all blown out? And I have, my #1 video on YouTube is actually dealing with that because, it was one of those things that we are showing you what that HDR footage is looking like in a 709 space. So everything above 100 IRE or 100 nits is just cut off. And this new methodology that we're doing things is going to prevent that. We're doing all of the right things as a final output step before we're going to the display to just kind of compress the gamut, do tone mapping of the highlights to make sure everything looks aesthetically pleasing as best we can.
Do you see there being any use for folks that are doing like a conform process before a full color grading pass? Or because you were kind of talking almost like a one-man band type of post setup.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that as you're working with color, if you are going to be doing some color work in Premiere as far as matching cameras, there's always that idea of providing the colorist your intent, right? And so this can definitely be useful in those circumstances where, what you're seeing in Premiere when you render a file like a chase file or something out of your sequences to hand to the colorist to kind of say, this is, you can provide a really good example of what the intent is, and then let the colorist do their job as far as matching that and making it even better.
Makes sense, though. I've seen some colorists and mixers kind of go, oh, thanks for your suggestion. So one thing that's also really interesting there is how do the color pipeline work with the other Adobe applications like After Effects? Is that going to hand back and forth?
Yeah, actually, that's another area that I didn't talk about before, but the nature of dynamic link between After Effects and Adobe Premiere has been improved significantly. So the color setup, the actual working color space within Premiere, when I send a clip from the Premiere timeline over into Adobe After Effects, After Effects actually picks that up and begins using that in the composition. That becomes the color settings in the project settings.
Excellent. So full pipeline there. Do we want to go over anything more on color pipeline, or we want to move into Firefly?
I think we should jump into Firefly.
Let's do it.
So generative AI, Carl, what Firefly is handling has been one of the most talked about features everywhere. Any meeting I go to, any user group I go to, it's the ability to generate content inside your Adobe applications. And one of the more popular concerns, I guess, would be what guardrails are on the generative AI that Firefly brings you that users kind of need to be aware of when they are using Firefly.
Well, part of our approach with Firefly has been to first off just make sure that we're trying to use as clean as possible a data set, so that we're not including copyrighted imagery and things like that. If you want to do a test on this, try and type in something that uses some sort of an IP from a studio, like Spider-Man flying from a building. You won't want to know what Firefly thinks a Spider-Man will look like. But it's one of those things that as you're creating content, we really are trying to get the message out there. We do not and never have trained Adobe Firefly on customer content. We only train when we have permission to do so. We're trying to make sure that this is commercially safe to begin with. The laws are being written, the lawsuits are happening as we speak, as far as what these different training sets are, and we're really even trying to come up with tools to protect content creators. If you check out the Content Authenticity Initiative, there's a lot of good information there where we have it's something Adobe founded, but there's over 3,000. Last I heard at IBC was 3,400 members. And these are everything from other types of content producers to camera makers to news agencies that are members of the Content Authenticity Initiative. And there's open source tools on there for kind of tracking where these pixels are coming from. Everything in Premiere, as we're bringing features that deal with Gen AI, we're making sure that we're tagging them with content credentials so that you'll be able to you can think of content credentials kind of like the nutritional label on the box of cereal. It's the type of thing that just lets you know where Gen AI pixels are in a particular piece that you've produced, so that as the studios come up with their rules and guidelines of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable to use, you'll be able to present kind of a report, a list, and say, hey, these are the pixels that were touched by Firefly. And that's another big area that we are addressing. There's even a full site on AI ethics that we actually have on the Adobe forum that kind of goes through, if you want to learn more about this, there is actually a lot of really good information on the website to just try and make sure that this is the case. I get some questions on Behance. Behance is kind of our user site for sort of sharing art and things like that. We explicitly prohibit and we actually take steps to prevent third parties from using Behance content and scraping that for using it as their own training data.
One more question on Firefly, because there's just so many things I want to ask you about. But do you find that the quality of Firefly as it gets more into Premiere, not just Photoshop, when it gets into motion video, do you find that being something that would be, dare I say, broadcast ready, or do you find it more of a prototyping tool or idea or something you just use as kind of a rough draft before it goes to a motion graphics or VFX house?
Hallucination tool.
Well, it definitely has a lot of value as far as those pre-visualizations are concerned. Storyboarding, Adobe Express even has a storyboarding template built into it where you can just go in and you can create storyboards very quickly from a prompt, and you can actually feed reference images into it so that what you're generating kind of matches a certain reference frame that you already have. As far as whether the final pixels are going to be delivered out of this, I will say, like, for today, as we're doing this webinar, the betas that we have for some of the generative stuff, we're starting off just making sure we can do really, really good 1080p content with 709 color space and things like that. As the technology grows, I mean, I would love to see it get to a point where final pixels could be delivered out of it. But right now, I would consider it more something that you would use in either the previs state, or, for somebody who is developing content, that 1080p as a delivery spec is perfectly fine.
Outstanding.
Excellent. So the thing is, we at KeyCode want to be at the forefront of AI, so we just need to make sure we got a capture for you. Please select all the coffee mugs. No, he's real. All right, better performance. So with the performance improvements, are there particular types of projects or hardware setups that are going to benefit most from this update? What are editors going to notice right away when they switch to this version? And any specific optimizations for handling larger codecs or more complex timelines in terms of playback and rendering?
We've definitely tried to really optimize the overall pipeline, and especially using the hardware that's available on both Windows and Mac platforms to accelerate export, that encoding process. And this also includes if you're doing like preview rendering in the timeline to something like a ProRes format. We just want to make sure that that is as fast as possible, that you're not waiting for things to render. It's a little crazy trying to figure out what hardware gets supported where. As the technology has been developed to do hardware decoding and hardware encoding, these are things that are found on everything from your typical GPUs. Macs like the M1, M2, M3s have dedicated silicon that's designed for this type of work. Even Intel, with some of their Core i9 chips and things, they have this type of functionality built into them. So we're just making sure that we're taking taking advantage of the latest and greatest in hardware. I do always get questions occasionally from a customer that says, "Hey, I recorded in a particular flavor of HEVC, but it's not 420, it's 422, and this and that." And sometimes there's a question is, why does this play back slower and not as fast as other clips? In a lot of cases, it's a limitation of the hardware, and we've come to rely more and more on that hardware. We're making sure, and we have great partnerships with these different companies as far as as they're going through and planning out roadmaps. We try to steer them in the right direction as far as what people are asking us for hardware encoding, and then we have to make sure that we're following through and developing and improving on our support for that hardware chipset.
Excellent. So vintage is cool for plugins, not for the hardware for transcoding and encoding.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things, the biggest stat that I have on this is we were able to improve ProRes kind of across the board. The best performance we are seeing is on the Apple Silicon Macs, where we're seeing up to a 3x speed increase. That means your files are rendering 3 times faster, or 1/3 the time is being spent, if I flip it around, I guess. Yeah, you're seeing overall performance enhancements and even support for like the latest and greatest cameras. That's one thing about this color management, is making sure that we have that direct communication with the camera makers, so that as they're coming out with these different log formats, that we fully support them. So, having DJI log support means we have to have a relationship with DJI, get the math from them. That's true for Nikon. It's true for Leica. All of these different formats are now supported, and we just want to make sure that you guys are always getting the latest and greatest. It seems like every other day a new camera format comes out, and then immediately I get the question, does Premiere support this particular format? So we're trying to get ahead of the curve here.
Yeah, and the other thing is, the whole pipeline is holistic. Your camera, your codec, your editorial platform, your hardware for your editorial platform. You need to look at what's best for you for that run. Some people do a lot of everything, and that becomes a bit of more of a challenge. But if you got a specific workflow, have a chat with us here at KeyCode. We can help sort that. Let's move
Absolutely.
on to
We love having the partnership with KeyCode, so that you guys can have that direct expertise as you're talking with customers and making sure that the right hardware gets into these clients. And it doesn't. You guys make Premiere look good.
We try.
Does that mean, Jeff, we're going to get your face on like the splash screen, so when Premiere Pro launches, it's your face?
That'd be great. Let's make
Send me a screenshot of that, will you,
Yeah.
Michael? That would...
Well, we can make that happen. Not a problem. Let's get on to the properties panel.
Sure. Editors make their bones on hitting deadlines and getting content out, and that's muscle memory, right? So introducing the new, or the refined, I should say, properties panel is going to be a little bit of a change for creatives. What was kind of the reasoning behind moving things to a properties panel as opposed to how it was done previously?
Well, I mean, I have some real world examples of very, very smart, intelligent editors that know Premiere, that like when we switched out the graphics engine and the type tool so that it was using something called the Essential Graphics panel, they immediately saw, oh, I click this and I start typing on the screen and hey, I'm making text. Now, how do I modify it? It was one of those things that it required somebody to actually go up to the window menu and pull down and pull up the correct control for that. So the goal with the properties panel is to make that sort of the initial one-stop shop, where depending on what you have selected in the timeline, it's a contextual panel. So the controls that are available, they're different if I just select an audio clip, whether I select an audio and video clip, just a video clip, or a graphic in the timeline. The controls change based on what I currently have selected. One thing I love about what they're doing, because it's not going to expose every single control in every circumstance. The existing panels are still the right way to kind of go about and do things. The oldest panel in Premiere, the effect controls panel, is still probably the best way to go in and do keyframing, because you have that keyframing experience that's much more like an After Effects style experience with easy ease in and out and those types of controls. But the properties panel becomes the way to find those. If you're new to Premiere, if you're just starting to get used to using Premiere, with properties, that becomes your starting place. And then there are easy controls, the 3-dot menu that I mentioned, that immediately exposes where any of the more advanced controls are. And that's kind of the idea behind it, is to just make Premiere a little bit more navigatable. Is that a word? So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very cool. Let's jump into the audio enhancements. And yes, we've noticed there's some user questions popped up. They're all at the bottom there waiting for us to get to. They're all about color management, oddly enough. Enhanced speech is a great feature, especially for those quick cleanups. How do you think it compares to traditional noise reduction plugins, and in what scenarios do you see this tool being the most beneficial? For users who work in environments with a lot of background noise, how customizable is the enhanced speech tool in achieving professional quality dialogue?
Well, first off, the controls for it are super simple. Literally, there's a button to turn it on and a mix slider to kind of blend in some of the original. And that's really it. We put it as a separate option from the other types of remove noise and the other types of filtering that we typically do. Nothing's been removed from the dialogue portion of the Essential Sound panel in Premiere. So there still are great tools in there as far as removing noise. And then there's things like DS, dehum, like specific specialty filters for cleaning things up. It's a different approach to noise removal. It works exceedingly well in situations where the background noise is in sort of a different frequency band, because what it's trying to do is it's looking for those the notes of human speech. So generally speaking, no matter who you are, human speech falls within a certain range of frequencies. And there are specific things that enhanced speech tries to identify. What we call phonemes. These are everything from the consonants and vowels and the combinations thereof that make up all different types of human speech, regardless of language. And the algorithm that works with this is trained to try and identify those. And it goes down to, analyze things down to like, a certain number of samples in your audio clip to try and figure out where those frequencies are and what exactly those phonemes are, so that it can rebuild the waveform. Is it perfect in every situation? No. I'm not going to try and say that it is the be all and end all tool. One area that it tends to kind of struggle with is if you have multiple speakers overlapping. I'm thinking about like somebody that's doing an interview where you have loud crowd people in the background yelling, yeah, you're going to run into some problems with those phonemes interfering with the phonemes of the person speaking. But in general, we've just seen phenomenal results with this. I had the pleasure of actually working with some of the news agencies at IBC last year when we were previewing this technology. This is now something that's just shipping in Premiere. It's been in Premiere for a little while now, where we actually had a news agency come to us and say, the battery on the lav mic died. We didn't notice it. We were interviewing a CEO of a technology partner, and the only way we were able to save it is use the camera audio and run it through enhanced speech, and it was able to do a really, really nice match. It's not, strictly speaking, generative AI from this perspective. It's not using a transcript or anything else to try and rebuild the waveform. I want to be really clear on that. That's one of the reasons why it does such an amazing job of capturing the tone and the inflection of the person. It's because it is taking the phoneme frequencies and just building them in a clean environment.
So it might have problems with Freddie Mercury if he was still alive.
and for those who don't know,
yeah, the range you're talking about there, one thing I have not tried it for is singing, and that's actually a good a use case that I should probably do some testing on.
Pull some Queen.
My torture test that I have for it is a friend of mine, a colleague, actually sent me something that was recorded on a cell phone sitting in someone's lap at a live event. And basically, the audio sounded like the adults in a Peanuts cartoon. It was wah wah wah. And the thing I did there was I actually did run it through Audition first. I kind of did an effect stack to try and get the frequencies down to where at least it was somewhat intelligible, and then ran it through enhanced speech, and I was pretty amazed at the result. It made it intelligible. It didn't sound great, I'm not going to lie. It didn't sound like a really nice professional recording, but it was something that you could actually understand what the person was saying, and you couldn't from the original clip at all.
And for those who don't know, and this was just announced a few weeks ago, the enhanced speech function won an HPA Engineering Excellence Award, which had some steep competition. So that's fantastic. And I actually have some real world experience utilizing this. When I was still in the sound chair, we used to have a phrase called, it doesn't sound better, it sounds different. Right? So you'd use different effects, different filters, and it wouldn't sound better, it just sounded a little bit different. And what I like about a tool like this that's built in is it gives you that first pass, and if it doesn't do it, okay, then you can bounce to a Waves or a Cedar or an Isotope, and where you get those individual parameters to tweak the noise reduction, the DS, the dehum, etc., to what that speech is. But for a that was easy button, the filter in Premiere is just fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think there's
Thank
other
you.
features, aren't there? There's a whole bunch of other stuff.
Normally, there's features that get buried, right? So what do you think is one of the unsung features that's been released that most people will overlook or and shouldn't overlook?
Well, I mean, I mentioned one of them before, which of course is the fact that we're now supporting linear timecode. That was something
what's old is new
I've
again,
been
Carl.
asking for quite a while. There was a general conception. The general attitude was, why do we want to support this technology that dates back to like the 90s? It's just one of those things that it has risen to the top. It's risen to the surface just because we're starting to see in the unscripted reality space, this use of just an enormous number of cameras. And in a lot of cases, those are cameras without any type of built-in timecode generation. So using something akin to like Tentacle Sync or other types of solutions, we're starting to see a lot more need for linear timecode. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm super excited about. I have one more I could actually show you really quick, because this actually solves a long time question that a lot of people have dealing with scaling picture. And to do this, I'm just going to take advantage. I'm going to do exactly what I did in the video there and just do a quick crop on some of these clips here. You'll notice that there are some buttons up here at the top for fill frame and fit to frame. These are the new hot options where if you're trying to fill the frame, if you're trying to scale your footage up to kind of fill a different frame from what it was shot in, or even scale stuff down. Premiere used to have an option called set to frame size. The set option would basically it would scale something up until one of the edges of the picture hit the edge of your sequence frame. So it would typically leave black bars somewhere. You would either have letterboxing or pillar boxing going on in the image. So we still have that functionality with fit to frame, but this idea of being able to fill the frame, if I hit fit to frame, it's not going to do anything right now because the left and right edges are touching the frame. But fill frame is going to push in a little bit further. And we're starting to see a lot of need for this, particularly with social media and people delivering at different aspect ratios where they don't want black bars, in particular trying to take 16:9 footage and do 9:16 and keep the entire frame in the shot means you have these ridiculously tall letterboxes. And so this is just another nicety that's been added. If you're used to the idea of doing this with a right-click menu, the options are also found here. So that older set to frame size has disappeared. It's kind of morphed into these two new options that you see here.
Quick question on that, Carl. For folks who are doing a conform in another application, how does that transfer over in terms of an XML or EDL? Is that going to cause problems during the online when you're relinking to the image and then the scaling not being right?
So there's some good information that's coming out in a lot of the forums that a lot of people are using this older option here called scale to frame size. That will cause conform issues because what this is designed to do is sort of, as the clip is coming into Premiere, as the very first thing it will do is it will scale the clip to fill the frame, but it will discard the extra pixels. And so anything that you do processing after that, basically the scale becomes the new 100%.
Okay.
And that completely freaks out if you're trying to send a Premiere sequence over to Resolve. If you use that functionality, you're going to see weird scaling artifacting. These fit to frame, fill frame options, if I were to go into the effect controls panel, what those are doing is using the proper scale value, and it's just doing the math for you to scale up, scale down to make sure that things are fitting in there. But it doesn't change the 100% value. This older option, this scale to frame size option, it's got some modern uses today. If you're editing proxy footage, but you're going to do your conform in Premiere, there's a couple of use cases for it. Once you've conformed it in Premiere back to the high res, it kind of goes away. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But if you're using this on a regular basis, it was originally designed as sort of a way of getting better performance for people in the early days of 4K workflows on systems that were really only designed to do HD. What this would do is say, well, your source footage is 4K. I'm going to scale it down to HD, and then I'm going to discard all those extra pixels for any further processing. So all the processing at that point, any effects, any color was done on the 1080p frame that was left over. It's kind of outdated for most workflows. There's a couple of small ones, basically, those are ones that I cover in some videos. If you're going through and you're trying to do, you're basically editing proxies that you're scaling up into a 5K or 6K timeline, it can have some use in those early days. But once you've kind of switched over to the high res, this functionality would turn off. And then, if you were going from Premiere at that point, it's fine. So there's a reason why we haven't completely eliminated it.
Yeah. Or
is what I'm trying to say here. But the vast majority of customers should get used to, the editor should get used to using fit to frame and fill frame, and those should not cause conform issues down the road.
Excellent.
Down the pipe.
The other thing could be that makes sense where you are looking at black bars and you're about to render for final output. You are the only or the last person in the chain. Let's toss that on there. If you got people downstream, you're going to mess up their lives. But if you are the last person in the chain, that could work to quickly get you where you want to be.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of questions from our teeming millions of viewers.
Our hundreds of billions. Michael Booth had a question. Can you explain the difference between source and clip in the color management settings?
Sure. So we are actually doing the color management is being done on the sequence level. So when you create a sequence in Premiere, you're choosing a working color. It's something we've kind of rolled it all into something we call color setup. So that it's basically one value that you can just change it, use one of the presets that's there, and for the vast majority of users, that's basically it. It's super simple. We're trying to keep this simple. Color is a complicated, deep rabbit hole of knowledge and information. So there are advanced controls I didn't go through and show just because I don't want to scare people. But there is a lot of tweakability if you need to get into it. I'm trying to remember the question now. Sorry, I'm having a little jet lag IBC brain moment. The basic, that's right, source monitor.
Yeah.
So
source
when you're
versus
working
clip
with
settings.
the source monitor, what we're doing in this initial release, there is actually a setting in the source monitor. If I switch over to my source monitor here, there is a setting in here where you can choose whether to show wide gamut as log or show it in a sort of a color managed role. This functionality is still something that's kind of a bit of a work in progress. I think I showed an example of this where I did a match frame on a clip to the source monitor. You can see there I've now switched over to the source monitor and I'm currently looking at this as log. When I switch this back over to color manage with wide gamut media, it provides kind of a general overall look to it, but it's not fully managed. It doesn't at this point match the sequence. That's an option that we're planning on adding moving forward. But right now, as we're playing around with this, as we have it in beta, what we asked a lot of customers, like, what would you like the clips to look like in the source monitor? And in general, Premiere's mindset with the source monitor has been to show the original clips. So if you're doing scaling and cropping in your sequence, you want to see every pixel that's in the shot. You can match frame to source, and the source monitor generally shows you everything. It shows you the original footage. So that's one of the reasons why we have this option in the wrench menu here with the source monitor, so that you can go back and see, well, wait a minute, what exactly did we shoot? Let me just hit match frame really quick. Oh, yeah, this is a log clip, and what I'm seeing is what Premiere is doing in the sequence. Does that make sense?
Because it has to be said, all kids love log. So question from our friends at Rummer Studios. You're saying if you bring in Canon log from a C300, for example, there's an auto color correct that you just do a quick render, or is it just going to be a preview kind of thing?
Well, there's no render step at all. Like I've got as an example in this particular sequence, let me bring up, let's see here. Bear with me 1 second while I'm just finding something. So the idea is these things are just automatically happening as we are working with them. So if I go in and I start working with the original media of this particular sequence, let me just I'll just do a reveal in project here is probably the simplest way for me to do this. There we go. So this particular clip, I think the bluish purple clips are Alexa clips. I think these are my Canon. Yeah, these are my Canon shots. So what is happening to this footage? I'll go ahead and just let me park on this frame here. I'll reveal this clip in the project. And what is happening here? These are all the different Canon C300 Mark II clips that I'm currently working with. If I right click on this clip and I go into modify color, you can see here that Premiere is automatically detecting from the clip metadata that this clip is a log3 cinema gamut clip, and it's doing the right thing with it from there. Now, if I don't want to have this particular clip color managed, if I want to just see it as log in Premiere, and I want to apply a LUT to it or something like that, I do have the ability to choose preserve RGB. I do have the ability to come in here and actually add some sort of an input LUT. So if for some reason you have a particular release of a Canon C300 Mark II or a C-Log3 LUT that you prefer the look of that for some reason, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. So If I want to turn all of this off, there's actually a, this is doing it on a clip by clip level. I can do multiple clips selected and affect all of this Canon footage at the same time and change the values. There are going to be some times where certain types of transcodes are going to destroy this clip metadata. And for that reason, there's always the ability to override the media color space so that if I wanted to have this recognized as something different, this is kind of a nice way of seeing all the different formats that we are supporting in this release. Panasonic V-Log is one I didn't name before. Red Log, Log 3 G10 wide gamut, different Sony options. There's, even just plain old sRGB is in the list if I need it. Apple Log Rec 2020 is in the list. So we try to recognize this by default. You have an option for overriding it if for some reason you need to. And then lastly, if you want to just get rid of this entirely and do all the color management yourself, it's possible to go into, I'll just use this to do just color, go to settings, and with this clip selected, so far I've just been talking about these color setup options here. One that I didn't mention before is the fact that this is also where you can just disable all of this. So we're trying to make sure that this is flexible, that it meets the needs of your pipeline, and that there's no unwanted changes. But for the vast majority of customers, we think that this new wide gamut option is going to be kind of the future. For the initial release of this, I think the default it's going to do is when you make a new sequence, is this will be set to the older Direct Rec 709, just because we don't want to mess up anybody's existing workflows. There's something called the principle of least astonishment when it comes to software development. We're trying to follow that so that the behavior will continue to be what you expected it before. But in a few years, we're very convinced that this wide gamut is a superior way of working. Not only is this a bigger color space to play around in, but it reorders the input transforms and the export transforms, or the output display transforms, in such a way that it means you've just got that wider space to play around with before we're compressing it at the end instead of compressing it at the beginning of the workflow.
Excellent. And for those who don't know, LUT is lookup table. This color equals that color. That's all it does. And I think the question Michael had here about, not your Michael Booth, showing a typical RE log C4 to SDR, log C4 to HDR workflow. I think you just showed it, really. You just go to the color setup and say, hey, this is going to be SDR, Rec 709, or this is going to be PQ or Rec 2020.
Well, when you're working in the wide gamut space, part of the beauty of working in wide gamut is you actually set your output color space as a separate step. So the idea is I have log that I'm starting. Actually, let me do it on this side. I have log that I'm starting with. I'm transforming it into the wonderful playground that is ACES CCT. So I have all the latitude to play around with. And then there's this extra step here on the screen that's called output color space. So by flipping this to Rec 2100 PQ or Rec 2100 HLG, or even just straight up Rec 2020, you're making sure that as you're delivering, this is going to be the viewing option of what I'm actually seeing in Premiere. And this is also going to be the option that will be used that gets sent to the exporter. There is a little bit of an extra step in the exporter step where you want to make sure and choose like a PQ preset. And those, I can actually show you those really quickly here. One challenge I have we're doing this over, a streaming technology that typically only does standard dynamic range. So if I flip this right now into 2100 PQ, it's going to look gorgeous on my MacBook with the XDR display. It's not going to look that great over Zoom. So if I flip this over, things start to look weird and bad for you guys. And so I've been kind of resident of trying to show you what Rec 709, anything other than Rec 709 is going to look like here. But once you flip this, when you go to export, if you are working with HLG or PQ, just make a point of clicking on the little three dots here and go into more presets. And up here, just type in PQ, because you're going to want to make sure that your export preset is actually matched to the color space you're trying to deliver to. So you see how we have, you know, everything all the way up to like Apple ProRes 4444 XQ, PQ, meaning that this is going to have the PQ data applied to it. So you just need to make sure that that is the case. These little stars represent adding these as favorites, so that if that's a common format that you're delivering to, just click the little stars, and that way it'll show up in the laundry list right here. You can see I have all those options available to me here, as well as the standard ones. If there ever is a mismatch for some reason, Premiere will actually warn you down here with a little exclamation point saying, hey, you've chosen one thing and but your sequence settings are actually different. So it gives you kind of an option of you know, detecting the problem before you go to render.
Which is good. And for those that don't know, PQ is perceptual quantizer. But you didn't know that one. Josh Glass has a question. How is the new color management going to work with third-party plugins?
How is it going to work with third-party plugins? Well, it's a good question. We are, in some cases, if we don't natively decode the footage, you know, it's one of those things that you do have to go out and get sort of an input plugin for it. You'll either manage it, either we will auto detect based on what the plugin installs into Premiere, or it will be the type of thing that you can just go in and use some sort of a transform LUT to, you know, just LUT manage it in the way you would expect to.
Very cool. We've run out of color questions, so because audio is always at the end of the pipeline. Josh had another question. The new enhanced speech function, how's that going to translate to an audio turnover workflow, AAF, etc., when setting to Pro Tools or another similar audio-only program for final mixing? You're going to a DAW.
Come on. If you're an audio house, you're undoing everything the picture editor did anyway. So do you really even have to address that?
I can actually talk about it. I mean, what happens in the sequence is that it is treated as an effect, but the good news is Premiere actually does render the new waveform as a separate wave file. So it's possible to include that with your turnovers to say, hey, you know, I did like a 50-50 mix between here's the original audio and here's the enhanced audio. So it is just basically an effect. You know, there are options when you go to export out to Pro Tools where you can choose to create a copy of baked in audio and the original, so you get kind of the wet mix and the dry mix in one Pro Tools session. Some Pro Tools artists love that. A lot of them hate it. So in those circumstances, for turnover purposes, you would probably want to manage this by including the rendered files with the output of the AAF file, and just provide that to them as an option if they want to do their own blending with it, or if they just want to throw it away and start from scratch.
Awesome. Another color correction question popped up at the very end. Why, when I update Premiere Pro, the updated version changes the LUTs I've applied to my timeline? I asked this once to Adobe support, and they said Adobe does not recognize LUTs.
I don't know who they asked that question to. There is some weird misinformation about where your LUTs need to be stored, and that could be causing a bit of a problem. On a Mac machine, it is possible to right-click on the Premiere Pro executable and do something called Show Package Contents. And if you go in there, you'll see some folders that deal with legacy LUTs. Do not put LUTs in there. Those were never designed to be showcased to the customers, but there's a lot of YouTube videos that say, yeah, just take your own LUTs and drop them in there and they'll show up in the list. I can send a support document. There is actually kind of a common location that you can put LUTs on both Windows and Mac to make sure that they will show up on a particular version of Premiere. If you have a lot of your own LUTs that are in this list, it is version specific, so you would want to make sure and migrate those LUTs into the position for the latest version of Premiere. You know, on a Finder level or on an Explorer level, when you go into your applications, or if you go into your documents folder, you'll actually find some different folders dealing with the name Adobe, the name Premiere Pro, and then you'll see separate folders for each revision of Premiere. And so sometimes it's just a matter of migrating those forward, and you can get those fixed. But if you are putting them inside the executable on a Mac, shame on you. Don't do that. Don't listen to the people that are telling you to do that, because Premiere uses those. That's based on a naming order. And so as you start to add stuff in there, it was never designed to be exposed to users. People just kind of love to tinker and figure this stuff out. And we did add actual support for external folders so that the LUTs will show up correctly when you're in here. If you're adding an input LUT, for example, this laundry list of LUTs that you see here is, it's not something that you want to tinker with. You want to put them in special folders that are called technical LUTs and creative LUTs folders that are found in a common location in your operating system.
One of the things I've seen quite a bit bite people is when you're using, let's say, Resolve to create a LUT, you can create a LUT that's a 65-point LUT. And if I'm not mistaken, Premiere doesn't understand a 65-point LUT, it's 33-point LUT. So a lot of folks say, hey, Adobe isn't seeing my LUT, when no, it's just, you just need to do the 33-point.
Yep. LUT
there have been some improvements on the LUT support. Now, this is kind of hitting me, and I'm trying to remember where we stored this data, and it might actually be in project settings. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head where we put this information. When it comes to certain types of LUT support, there was a point in time where, and this gets into it, there's different types of LUTs, there's different types of geometry, color geometry and mathematics that are used as part of this. There was a point where we only supported trilinear LUTs, and we do support tetrahedral LUTs. I don't know where the upward limit is, if it's a 64 point grid, or if it's higher now. We are always looking at improving on stuff like that. But if we do make any changes, it will probably be found under the project settings color tab is where you'll see any improvements to that coming.
Well, I've got some LUTs to try out then.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. LUT management is also a very important topic if you are in color grading, and especially in a collaborative color grading environment. Managing where those are, sometimes in shared folders, is important. Managing whose creative property they are is also very important. Sometimes colorist A's LUTs are different than colorist B's LUTs, and that's something they spend a lot of time doing. Ask when you're using LUTs, and anytime you bring a piece of software forward, update your LUT locations, update your LUT library, archive the old ones, make sure it's out of the way, because otherwise sometimes your LUT library doubles, and all of a sudden it's humongous.
And I'll also mention that many times LUTs are designed to work with a specific color space, so that if you're using LUTs that are 709, there's actually two different versions of 709. There's 709 with baked in gamma, and then there's scene referred 709. You want to make sure that you're using the correct settings in Premiere, particularly for creative LUTs. So if I go back to my screen for a second, I'm just in the Lumetri panel here under the creative tab. Something I just thought I would mention, these are all the LUTs that typically ship with Premiere. If I select one of these, it does an application of the LUT here, but you'll notice there's a new option here for color space. So if you know the color space of the LUT that you're working with, you can actually select it here, so that if you are in an HDR pipeline, you're working with PQ footage specifically. If you have LUTs that are designed to work with PQ footage, you can actually choose that in this list, and that way your LUT will do the right thing for your PQ delivery. So it's a new control that was just added as part of this color management. We had to make these color effects. There was actually a lot of work done to make all the color effects in Premiere. There's a list of them that's available on the beta site, and there's probably more forthcoming, but I think the majority of them are covered, where we have to make sure that these color effects are actually color space aware, so that as you're moving things around, that they're doing the right thing for the color space that you're working in.
Yep. Otherwise, very unusual results may transpire.
Exactly.
So we get a question here from Rummer
We're
Studios.
trying to walk that fine line between keeping everything simple and making sure that it works correctly, but then also providing the control for the advanced person doing color that wants to go in and actually tweak different values. So, everything that has to do with the tone mapping, whether it's input tone mapping or output tone mapping, gamut compression, there are controls that are in there that are found in those advanced tabs. So there's a lot of work that was done to make sure that this meets the needs of keep it simple, but make it advanced if somebody wants.
Excellent. So we got one question here from Rumor Studios. What version of Premiere is this demo, and when's the full live release going to be coming out?
Very good question. Right now, I am actually using the current publicly available beta. So I believe the beta number was rev to 25.1. Now the shipping version of Premiere is 24.6.x. I want to say it's .1, but I haven't checked recently, so there may be a .2. I don't remember. So there is, this is going to stay in beta for a little bit. We want to make sure that people get an opportunity to test it. There's no unwanted lack of a color pipeline. We're trying to make sure that these are all just new options with better results. So we're keeping it in beta for just a little bit longer. I can't say for certain exactly when this will ship, but obviously this is a version 25 beta that we showcased this at IBC, but that beta is now publicly available. If you go to the Adobe Creative Cloud desktop application, you can actually go in and look for, under apps, find the beta flask that you see here. And this is where you can go and install any of the betas that are available. This particularly is the Premiere Pro beta, and oh, hey, a new update dropped today. So I'll have to go and check that out. Yeah, so it's publicly available for testing purposes. I don't recommend switching over to this for your, full production pipeline at this point. The betas, sometimes as they're adding a new feature in one area, it can break something else. And, we always recommend sticking with the shipping version. But we do encourage you to kind of check this out and test it out now and see how this works with your cameras. I'm sure there's going to be certain varieties of certain cameras. Like I mentioned, this is an R5C here, and there's like 17 different modes. I think there's even a way of doing log 3 non-cinema gamut, stuff, those different variations. I'm sure we're going to hit some that are not coming in, but where you'll have to kind of figure out how to manage those. But the vast majority of the settings we are working on, and part of the beta is to make sure we're plugging any holes that might exist.
Excellent. Thanks, Carl. And while it's pronounced beta, it is spelled, please don't use this version on a revenue producing project. Thanks everybody for watching today. If you're in the planning stage of improving your Adobe creative team workflow, please don't hesitate to contact us here at KeyCode Media. Our workflow engineer team is standing by to help you find the right tech. And our apologies to Matt Damon, but that's all we got today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Broadcast to Post. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive future episodes. Follow KeyCode Media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to receive news on additional AV, broadcast, and post-production technology content. See you next time, folks.